the Ran is often commenting on the Rambam and the Ramban and other commentators, other halachic authorities that he tries to navigate between and give a maskana, at least his maskana, his kind of psak and how he arrives at it. So I picked out, I think, a total of 15 things. I don't know that we'll get to all 15 of them. Some of them are very short. Some of them are not as short. 11 of them are from the Ran on Megillah, and 1, 2, 3, 4 are from the Rambam. I'm leaving the Rambam for last, so we may not even get to the Rambam. Okay, they're in your handouts that you each have. I numbered each page, and I numbered each one of these 11. So we're going to start with 1, and I even have something that really. The reason why I picked the Ran is because 2 nights ago I started looking at it, and there was a maybe it was just last night. This is last night. That's why I love the Ran. I can do it very quickly. It's like, because it's so interesting. Like when something's boring, you fall asleep 100 times before you do it. The Ran is interesting, so like it moves. So I think it was last night, and I read the Ran, and it moved me to tears, and I felt it was really relevant to today, what's going on in the world after October 7th. So, and I'll share, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I believe that was in number 1 and 2. You're going to see that in number 1 and 2. So the first question is a bomb. There's something called a bomb kasha, which means there's a bomb. It's like a big question. If you start reading the Megillah, Masechtas Megillah, you'll find right away a very intricate conversation about the different days that different communities get to read the Megillah on. That's the first Mishnah. And the rest of the Masechta is permeated with this distinction of different types of communities. The main distinction is a city versus a walled city, and when the city was walled from is debated, whether it's from the time of Achashverosh or the time of Yoshua ben Nun. And then there are the small villages that get to do it earlier on the Monday and Thursday before, and what about when a certain day Purim falls out on Shabbos or Friday or Sunday. And all of these things take up an inordinate amount of time. And comes the Ran and asks this very strong question. And number 1, I circled it for your viewing ease. The Yeshkan Shaila Maro Anshe Knesses Hagdola. I'm right above what I circled, actually. Page 1. Yeah, number 1. Page 1, number 1. Okay? There's a big question. What is it that the men of the Great Assembly wanted to divide this mitzvah liyamim chalukim to different days? L'kvo yom miyuchad l'prazim, yom miyuchad l'krachim, masha enkin b'shar mitzvah sharitor amar Torah, achas mishpat echad yeh. It's a good question. All the time, Judaism says, let's have one Torah. Here they're saying one holiday day for you, another holiday for you, another holiday for you. Why? They don't do it any other holiday. We only do it now. Again, we could start talking about Yantav Sheni Shagaliot, and we could start talking about, does Shavuos really fall out on a day of the month, or is it 50 days after Pesach? What if you went through the date line? These are conversations, but we're not going to have them today. We're going to stay. No questions. No questions. Write all the questions. I know you have so many questions, so write them all down, and I'll write we'll make a book on it after or towards the end of this year. Yeah, just your questions are going to need a book. Everyone else's questions combined will need a second book. A pamphlet for the rest of us. You're getting a book, Sally. You're getting a book. You're going to have a solid book here. At least a half a book, just from tonight. So this is the Ran's question, and so he gives an answer. It doesn't seem so mind blowing. It seems like technical. But then he's going to compare that to number 2, which is the answer of the Rambam of Nachmanadies. And then he's going to deconstruct number 2. He's going to argue on Maimonides. And I think when we look at this kind of argument, we're going to see something reminiscent of what's going on in the world today with how do we approach a monumental tragedy or event that affects Jewish people, and how different people who are Jews react differently to the same event. Is there some core nakuda that combines us all, or is it just everyone and anyone and their own way? Is that okay? That's the premise. That's what struck me about these for number 1 and number 2. So he says the following. So he says, Yeshlomar Yehuda Mayoshu Ba'arya Prazot Vayehuda Asher B'Shushan Lo Nachem Oveim B'Yom. The simple answer: the people in the open cities versus the people in the city of Shushan, which was a walled city, they didn't rest from their enemies on the same day. One, the ones outside of Shushan rested on the 14th, the ones in Shushan on the 15th. And each one of them on their respective individual day made a party, made a celebration. When they did establish a holiday for the generations, for the future, they instituted it according to their individual days that they were victorious and rested on. And they equated all walled cities to Shushan. Because that's the main miracle was in Shushan. So that would be okay according to the opinion. I mentioned it's a debate about exactly from when does the walled city have to be walled. That opinion is from the time of Achashverosh. That would make sense. But according to the other Tana, which was codified as the law, that it's from a walled city from the time of Joshua, then the cities that we do right now today, like in Yerushalayim, read on the 15th, they're not really similar to Shushan. They're more of an Israeli thing, so to speak. Fascinating, right? To think that he was writing this 700 something years ago, but now, Baruch Hashem, Eretz Yisrael is like a reality, right? A beautiful thing. So, but how is it like Shushan? Why are we making them read on the 15th? That's to give them honor, to honor Israel. He quotes the Yerushalmi that says, Amar for that reason, to give them honor, the land of Israel. In those days, in the days of Esther, it was in ruins. It was the Churban, the base of Megillah was in ruins. And therefore we connected it to the entry into the Eretz Yisrael in the time of Joshua. Since we made the distinction, just like we already made a distinction from Shushan to the other open cities, if you wouldn't have made this new distinction about the time of Joshua, we would have treated Jerusalem and many of the other cities in Eretz Yisrael that were walled as if they were nothing special. And it would be something distasteful. It wouldn't, meaning it's like saying, here's this holiday. It happened outside of Eretz Yisrael. The most special part of the holiday happened outside of Eretz Yisrael. It has no connection to Eretz Yisrael, because at that time, what do you do when you have an enemy? What's the first thing you do to your enemy? You take away their fortified cities. So it's a reminder that we had no fortification because we were in exile in our own land. So it's almost like we're celebrating this thing that has a built-in reminder of how bad things are for Eretz Yisrael. That's not a celebration. So therefore, they wanted to do a boost to the situation. So they made this artificial celebration connected to Eretz Yisrael, which is amazing. That now you go to Eretz Yisrael and people are celebrating 2 days. People are running to Jerusalem to have a second day of Purim, right? But we don't want it. But we want to actually make it more of a simcha for Eretz Yisrael. Because if we didn't do that, it wouldn't be a simcha for Eretz Yisrael. So we found a way to make a holiday which, by the way, the whole thing of Eretz Yisrael is very hidden. You find no mention of Eretz Yisrael. Like there's two things that are very absent from the Megillah. One is God. The other one is Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, you know how you know it's really hidden? Because there are parallel Sifrei Nevi'im, Ksuvim of what was going on then, and it was about the relationship of the America, the superpower of their time, with Eretz Yisrael. And here there's no mention of it. But we know that it was that it's not even true. Like not mentioning it is like leaving it's like the elephant in the room. So we know what was there, and for some reason it's like hidden. Okay. And that's why Chazal say Ad Chatzi Malchus. That's Yerushalayim. But it's not in the verse. It's just like a medrash that we say. Okay. Now Leficha Tolo Adar B'Mos Yoshua Benun K'dei Shtei Donis K'Krach Shaf B'Shach Shav Ein Lahem Choma Kimin Shosem B'Kefas B'Mos Yoshua Benun Hari Dina Kilu Yesh Bo Choma. Even if it has no wall now or then, it's very clear that Ron is saying if all of those fortified cities had lost their fortification, the Ron Paskins, like the Gemara says, it doesn't matter. They had it then, it's good now. Shetei Nedonos K'Krachim. Okay. Now, Gemara brings a proof text of the Gemara, and then he gets into Kedusha Rishona, whether it's Kitchel L'Shayda or Kitchel L'Asad Lavo. Even if we don't say the original sanctity carries on for the future, he says, but still there's something about it being considered a walled city, even though there's 2 dinim in a walled city. There's actually 3 dinim in a walled city we're going to talk about for a moment. One din of a walled city has certain Kedusha. There's another, and that's connected to Kedusha Eretz Yisrael, and an added Tosat post Kedusha that the Torah talks about. Another level that is, there's a Gemara that talks about the idea of Krachan HaMukaf and Choma, not about Megillah, and after the time of Korban, of still having some Kedusha in it. And a lot of the Rishonim say, what are they talking about? Rabbi Soloveitchik has a beautiful teaching about these 2 levels of the Kedusha of Batei Arachoma or Arichoma. And the third level is what the Ran introduces, which is the Arechoma for the Megillah. It's not the same dinim as the first 2. And he talks about it a number of times. Okay, that's the first teaching. Now, Abel Ramban Zal. Now, that's just the introduction to number 2, because that's where it gets really wonderful. The Ramban says, number 2, Nosentama Acher. Another reason, L'chalo Asman Shal Prazim Ukafin, to differentiate the time of these 2 types of cities. V'omer shebizmana shel nes kvar nifkudu Yisrael v'olu birshion koresh v'nisyashvu ba'areim. He learns a certain type of history that the Ran will disagree with, that the majority of Jews went and made Aliyah in the time of Koresh, who said he was going to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash. And they already settled. What about the fact that Haman said they're spread out amongst the nations? The majority of Israel, along with the men of the Great Assembly, were in Eretz Yisrael at that time. I'm just going to read it in English now. And eventually others would go back right in the time of Ezra, but that was a minority. And when Achashverosh said we're going to destroy everyone in the walled cities and the open cities, there was a bigger amount of fear of death in the open cities. But according to this reading, they didn't bring down all the walled cities in Israel because they were resettling. There was already a early Zionist Second Temple period, according to the Ramban, where they were resettling the land. The majority of them were already in Eretz Yisrael, and they had secured some locations with fortification in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, he says a very, very big chiddush. This is an amazing chiddush. Up until now, according to the Ran, what's the bigger, greater holiday of the two? The 14th or the 15th? We did it. Which is like, what shows you more value if you celebrate on the 14th or the 15th? According to what we just did in number one. I said it. Maybe I didn't spell it out 100% clearly. No, the second day. Because the fighting continued, and that's a bigger deal. Shushan was the main nest. That's the Ran. The Ramban says the exact opposite. You know what the Ramban says? There wasn't a real danger for the people in the walled cities because the majority of people were in Eretz Yisrael. Minority were. So the real majority of the people were in Eretz Yisrael. Where would they go? They'd go to their neighboring walled city, take refuge there, and wait out whatever. They'd lay a little siege. They'd throw some hot oil on them, and they'd go away. So what happened then, according to this version, comes the actual event, much better than we thought, because Achashverosh signed new edicts that gave us permission to defend ourselves and was against our enemies and so on. Guess what happens then? It's still a miracle. It's still a miracle, especially what could have happened, but you know where it's a greater miracle? You were correct then. The 14th, because the 14th is the non-walled cities that didn't have protection. Now, we're not talking really so much about Shushan as much as Eretz Yisrael. The main event, according to Rambam historically, is Eretz Yisrael because that's where the majority of Jews are. According to the Ram, it's the opposite. The main event is in Shushan and the far-flung corners of this Shushan Empire, the Persian Empire. And he's working hard to explain why we give credit to the time of Yoshua ben Nun. That's for spiritual reasons of elevating the status of Eretz Yisrael. If they were in the open cities, yeah, they were under the empire. But there's a major chiddush of the Rambam: A, that the majority of Jews had made Aliyah; B, that they were secure in their walled cities. And C, as an outcome of that, he says a historical version of history is that originally only the people in the open cities celebrated Purim, and the people who were in the walled cities, particularly in Eretz Yisrael, but let's say also in Shushan, didn't even have Purim any day, not the 14th or the 15th. Why? Because they were never in danger. That was. At that time, and he brings a proof where he says he brings various proofs for this. That's what he does. Now, what happened is eventually he says the following: this is beautiful. This is where I started crying. Okay, I cry very easily. But okay, now this is a big deal. You see, right in the middle, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom of what I circled. Okay, hey Matthew, give Matthew a handout if anybody could spare. Is there any extra ones, or you could share? You could share, yeah. For the achar zman, listen to this. This is what I thought is going to be relevant to how we process what's going on now. Maybe not now, but in 5 or 10 years from now. Shehar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Einehem Umatzus Mach Torah. After a period of time, how much time? I don't know. 10 years, 20 years between when the story happened. 15 years. A bunch of years go by, and then he says their eyes were illuminated, right? Meaning God enlightened them. God illuminated their eyes. They gave them insight, and they found a smach min Torah. They found an allusion to something that would support in Torah this idea. Amad Mordechai Bestino v'ro divrei shel prazim. That he saw that even in the 100 years of 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 walled cities that we said before didn't consider themselves in a danger, they also should make themselves a holiday for the generations. B'kavu also, I'll call Yisrael Shekul Besafik Bro Lahaktim Prazim Lemukafim. I'm sorry, the opposite. Eventually, okay. So eventually they did establish a holiday not just in the open cities but in the walled cities as well. That they realized that really they shouldn't have felt so smug in their security of their walled cities. They also really were in danger if God didn't save them, and they're going to also join in, not like everyone else, but in their own way. Everyone else is celebrating. They're going to celebrate the fifth. Okay, and they nisim hayagadol shehem eschila b'mitzvot chila lasel hem levadam yantiv. But it was two stages. First, the original people who celebrated were the people in the open cities. They didn't need any prompting. They didn't need Mordechai to do this whole thing. They were just celebrating on their own. Eventually, Mordechai said, "Not just you guys, also the walled cities as well." And so, therefore, to commemorate that distinction in the evolution of how the holiday happened, we continue to celebrate it on two separate days.
Because originally they got
It's a good. Write it down. Write it down. I value what you're saying. Write it down. I'm not as smart to answer. I don't have the answer. We'll make a book out of it. I'm smart enough not to answer. L'chaim. What is Rabbi the rabbi from 441? Rabbi Safran. So what is Rabbi Safran? When he answers your questions on the spot, he's a genius. What can I do? He's ready for next week. Okay. Is he? I thought it was his brother. His father was. His brother was there. Him? It's a big deal. Okay. Is he Taka?
yes.
I thought it was his brother, and then his brother passed away. I'm not following. Okay. Good. Very nice. Fine. Very good. Okay. So, and he brings a proof. He explains something like this. Yeah.
That it was different experience than not in the water, like in the open city. What is the minyan of celebrating at different days having to do with being the wall city or not?
So here's to just quickly review the Rambam's position, which he doesn't agree with, and I'll tell you why. The Rambam's position is that it was obvious right away that the people in the open cities, a miracle occurred, that they weren't killed because they weren't protected. The people in the walled cities, especially in Eretz Yisrael, where most of the walled cities weren't really so worried because they had a defense. They could defend themselves. So when their miracle happened, they didn't consider it a big miracle. Many years later, something happened where through Mordechai and the Sanhedrin, they realized that a miracle happened for everyone, not just the people in the open cities. And that's when they established a holiday. Now, just bear with me for a moment here to let me make it relevant even. That's what I wanted to share with you this thought. What? Because it wasn't okay. Let me explain to you something. Well, how do you define something that everyone in the Jewish people are going to resonate with enough to establish it as a holiday, especially after it's very controversial to make a holiday. right? We don't just make holidays. We're not the New York City public school system, right? We're very careful of making a holiday. So what's going to get us to make a holiday? So there's two things. One thing is that there has to be a miracle. The other thing, similar to teaching of the Arizal, is that something has to happen that's like very deeply rooted in us on a level that is a reoccurring event. It's not just to happen. It's like it's rooted in our being, and it's going to happen every year almost. Like that's what we say about a biblical holiday. When we celebrate the biblical holiday, why is it that they celebrated, let's say, Pesach before it happened? Why were the Avos doing a Seder? It doesn't make any sense. The answer is because no, the Seder, the Pesach always happened. It happened spiritually every year at that time. Just one year, it actualized in the Exodus from Egypt. But every year, the energy was there before and after. That's a definition of how we see a holiday. Not just as a signifier of a historical event, but something that recalls God's relationship with us. Okay? You getting a little bit now? If you're not, it's too bad. You'll talk to me later. We'll put it in the book. Okay.
Didn't tell that they shouldn't kill the Jews. The miracle was he told the Jews they could protect them.
Yeah, he didn't rescind the decree. Absolutely, he only tweaked it to let them defend themselves. So there was still some. And we're going to go on. Sally, you used up you used up. Write it down. Just write it down. I've got 13 things. I got a lot of pages to do. Now I got to go fast now. Number 3. Number 2 is resolved in number 3, where he rejects the Ramban's opinion. He doesn't like his view of history. He doesn't agree with him that the majority of Jews made Aliyah, and therefore he says he doesn't see why they would be in any less sakana. Most Jews in walled cities would be in non-Jewish areas like Shushan and would be in danger of their own neighbors killing them, and therefore he rejects the Ramban's distinction. Okay, number 3. He goes back to the original question. Now we kind of settled 2 different opinions about the 14th verse 15th. What about the 11th, 12th, and 13th that are allowed for the little villagers? Now here there's Ishbit Torah. So he says, what about the fact that he gets more specific about there's a Torah prohibition to make different communities that are divided? There's a verse that says not to make. I'll take what is the verse? The verse says lo tiskodedu. Lo tiskodedu means not to like what? To make a wound in yourself. Yeah, and the Gemara darshans that not to make agudot, not to separate yourself into warring communities. You should make one aguda, but not many agudot. Now, Rabbah says, there's a machlokas in the Gemara in Yevamos about what that means. Rabbah says that the only time you have 2 agudot is when you have one Beis Din, and half the Beis Din paskins like Beis Hillel, and the other half paskin like Beis Shammai. By the way, do you know that the law is, unlike the Supreme Court, there's no majority and minority opinion in the Sanhedrin. There's only one opinion. They vote. After the majority is confirmed, that's what the minority doesn't get to say, we didn't agree, and here's why. There's no minority opinion. In other words, the majority opinion overrules the minority opinion, and they issue a statement, chayev or not, whatever the law is. So we don't want to have an ongoing, opening, festering discussion and debate that is open-ended. The Beis Din is the Beis Din, and if they paskin like Beis Hillel, in one case, good. If they paskin like Beis Shammai, in another case, also good. But they can't have two like ongoing Beis Dins within one. There's another opinion that says you can't even have 2 Beis Dins. Because imagine you have like a little town like Manhattan, and maybe it's not so little, and you have a very formal Beis Din and another formal Beis Din. And like, which Beis Din are you going to? I'm going to the Hasidic Beis Din. I'm going to the Yeshivish Beis Din. I'm going to the non-Orthodox Beis Din. That's not good either. Okay, well, why do we do it then? Good question. The reason why we do that is because Hasidim and Misnagdim and Chabad and Satmar they're already who they are. And we look at that as like a minhag hamakam. We look at each of those people like their own city. And therefore, when you look at a city like New York, you look at it as like 100 cities. That's the answer. That's our emotion. I'm really like simplifying Ramosh and other great.
City.
In other words, it's a reality that represents different communities, even though we're living side by side in the same community. Anyway, the bottom line is, he asked this question, and he says that really you can say my answer. Ramosha's answer could apply to how we look at the dynamics of the small cities and the big cities. And you read it inside and you'll see that. Now I'm going on to number 4. Number 4 is Meridik, as is number 5. They're both in the same box. So you got number 3? If you didn't, come to me after Mariv. I'll explain any of this to you after Mariv, but right now we gotta move. So here's another one. There's a really weird Gemara. The Gemara says, and this is, what is it about how do we know the 11th and the 12th? How do we know all of that? So we learn out, there's 2 different psukim that we can learn it out from. Yes, please. Thank you very much, Greg. And what about the 13th? The Gemara says, well, we don't need a pasuk for the 13th. These are the 13th day of Adar that we would be able to read at a certain day at times, because Zman Kihila Lakol. It's a time of gathering for everyone. First of all, gathering for what? They were fighting. We don't celebrate when you're fighting. That's the question the Ran asks. Here's the answer. I still owe you an Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer is coming. I've got now I'm coming up the second Ishbitzer, and I forgot to tell you the first. Here's the answer. Okay. Here's how I don't remember what he says, but this is what I felt when I read it. Zman Kihila Lakol is at that moment, whatever type of Jew you were, a walled city Jew, an open city Jew, we knew we had an enemy that we were in danger of being annihilated by, and that united us all. So it's actually, in a sense, the day of unification. The 14th and the 15th, the 11th and the 12th, they're each for their own individual minhagim. One's Satmar, one's Lakewood, one's Chabad, one's Business. But there was one day of all of the days that was a Zaman Kehila. You hear, Rafael? It's a Meridik of art. I have to read it inside again because I don't remember all 11 things by heart. But that's the takeaway. Okay, that's number 4. Comes number 5. Does anyone know if Tinus Esther is in the Gemara? Absolutely not. Where's one of the first places that mention it? This run. What is it? It's a little bit before, a couple hundred years before him, but he brings it all together beautifully in number 5, and he says the following. He says, Zman Kihila Lakol is Tinus Esther. It's the same thing as I was saying before. They were fighting, so they were also fasting. Again, it's a remes, and he quotes one of the Gaonim and one of the Bali Tosos. So he's not the Mechadish of this idea, but it's a beautiful idea. And he says the following. He says, why does it say Nikalu v'omer al nasham? I'll start with Rabbeinu Tam Zal. It should have said a war. And he says it's not a question because Nikalu v'omer al nasham, who's up here? Asman Kila Lakol. They all fasted on the day of the war. Because they were standing up for their lives. And I also found this in the Shiltas of Rav Acha. So we have 2 earlier sources. Again, it's not Gemara, but it's still a nice teaching that Yud Gimel Asutanius b'mei Mordechai Esther V'shakol nikalu la'amod al Hashem v'yitzrichim rachamim. We learned the same thing. The Gemara in Tainus talks about the Moshe and Aaron and Hor made a Tainus Tzibur when they were fighting against Amalek. So again, maybe we should have made a October 7th. Okay. Now, what does the Ishbitzer say? Here's what the Ishbitzer says, my friends. He says a very beautiful vart. Same thing. It's going really deeper. Let's go deeper here. You know what it is? There's two types of people. There's a Talmud Chacham. That's like a Ben Ir, a sophisticated guy. Then there's a Krachan Amukafim Choma. They're in the ivory tower. They're not just a businessman who learns. They're like a Rosh Hashiva giving shiurim all day and night. And what about the rest of us? What about the people who live in the sticks? Those are the little villagers in their town. Now, really, we know the real battle against Amalek. It's the battle that Talmidei Chacham need to wage. But comes to Ishbitzer, is not really on the deepest level. The simple yid who thinks to himself, "Why am I special? I don't do that much." When he realizes what his value is, then we're makdim. There's a whole vart in this holiday is reason makdim in the mitzvahs. It's all about, we're not going to push it off. There are other holidays we push off, right? A carbon chagiga, a carbon riyah. The Gemara talks about whether we push those things off rather than bring them in early. Here we bring it in early rather than push it off. So bringing it early represents more connection to this day. And how is that? Maybe we'll get to that in a little later about what it means when it's revealed to us that what we think that we're not connected, when we're revealed, this is the holiday that reveals our connection that we didn't know about. So that's the question. The answer, all of the questions that you were asking is, how do you process something that happened to make it into a holiday that makes you realize something that you didn't realize before? That makes you a Jew in another way that you weren't a Jew the way before that. That's a holiday. That's what Purim is. Okay, number 6 and 6 feet here on the page 3. He quotes the Rambam, and this is just very interesting. I'm going to say it outside. What are Asarah Batlanim? There's a machlokas between Rishonim, but here comes the Ramban and introduces yet I think a third way. It says Asarah Batlanim doesn't necessarily mean 10 people are unemployed or employed by the community to do certain things. It rather means 10 people who show up to minyan every day. Okay, that's number 6. And what? You were called worse. To be a batlan. You have to be a little bit of a batlan to show up for minyan. 6b, I'm going to skip. Number 7, number 8 on page 4. Very controversial. I didn't want to tell you this, but now we're going to talk about women reading the Megillah. Zuk number 7. Nashim Chayab. This is on page 4 of the Ran in the box. Nashim are obligated in the reading of the Megillah. They were also part of the miracle. The Ikar Apirish, the Afin Sakana. The main explanation is they were also in danger. We say the same thing when it comes to the Seder. That's why they participate in having a Seder. They have Dal Kosos and so on, or the lighting of the Hanukkah, that they were also in those miracles. There is an opinion, a very significant opinion, the majority opinion, that they can read the Megillah for men. And they would fulfill a man's obligation. I say a majority opinion back then, not anymore. Anybody who's obligated in something, why is it that they will fulfill other people's obligation? Because they themselves are obligated. That's the implication of what it says in Gemara in Erechin. That everyone being obligated to hear the Megillah or to read the Megillah includes women. That would imply that they could also fulfill other people their obligation by listening. She can. That's the opinion of Rashi, major figure. Aval b'shem, the halachas gedolos. Halachas gedolos is early Rishon. Kasu shein chayavus l'shmo as a Megillah. He writes something, a big chiddush, that they have to hear it, but they're not obligated to read it. And therefore they can't fulfill the obligation of the men. If you bring some proofs. He must have had some other reading that mentioned specifically Megillah, some reading in some place that implies that they're only obligated to hear and not to read. And anyway, because so he ends off. The Ran ends off with that ve'enza mechaver, which means he's not correct. He's incorrect. But now that would be very nice, very West Side rabbi, the Ran, to say this. There's only one problem. The next three words. He says, not Kol Isha, he doesn't say that. It's nice to be machmer. So basically, if you say, if somebody, you want to be honest, if someone says, can women read the Megillah, you could say, well, really they can, but it's good to be machmer not to. Halachically they can, but there's a chumrah that they shouldn't be. That's the bottom line. That's really what it is. But the problem is, once you have hundreds of years of not doing the Megillah, because first of all, they weren't. You think they were pushing to do the Megillah in Poland? They weren't. They had other problems, right? This wasn't like they couldn't read Hebrew. So okay, once in a while somebody could read Hebrew. If you could get a man to read Hebrew, that was already great. You're going to get the woman to read Hebrew. Only the very they were self-taught, or their fathers had to spend special time with them. Number 8. You're obligated to read the Megillah at night and to repeat it during the day. There's a verse that he quotes. He quotes the most famous, possibly, Baal Tosfos, Rabbi Tam, that says the main reading is during the day. What's the halachic difference if that's the case? You have to make a shehechiyanu, even though you already made a shehechiyanu at night. You have to make a shehechiyanu in the morning or daytime as well. Because the main PR of the miracle is during the day. That's also the Mishnah brought down in Daf Chaf. It's not kol yom kosher l'kriyas Megillah, but it's not nami. Ein koron Megillah v'lomazim v'lomalin v'lotovlin ella b'yom pirshu b'gemara minalin t'chsiv ayam ha'elin niskarmanas. The main reading is during the day. There's some opinions that even say that it was Namora that says you have to read at night. That there might have been a period of time that they didn't actually read it at night. They only read it at the day. That's controversial, but there's a machlokus. At least that's an opinion that reads like that. So, okay, interesting. Number 9. By the way, the Rambam doesn't agree with this. And the Rambam says you don't make a shehechiyanu during the day. A lot of Spartam are overly influenced by the Rambam. So, I'm not sure what if Spartam, how they hold. But anyway, we'll get to that if we have time. We do, yes. We make a bracha shehechiyanu during the day as well. Number 9. Yeah, but that's an afterthought. Meaning we say, think of all the mitzvahs. But the bottom line is, the Ran says, because it's the main mitzvah, is during the day. The fact that we also think of the mitzvahs is like an add-on. Okay? So, number 9. So, this is just a little bit about whether or not you need to have a tzibur. It's a back and forth. The bottom line is you don't need to have a minyan for the reading of the Megillah, but it's a nice thing to have it. Here's a great question. Great question. Listen to this one. You're going to like this, Sal. You'll go home. You'll tell the wife. What if you like to be machmer? You like to have a minyan. You've got 5 men, 5 women. Is that a minyan? You don't have to have a minyan, but you like to have a minyan to be choshesh to all of these opinions. Better to have. They say it's better, not required. You're still yotze. You're still what? They have to hear, according to the Ran, you have a minyan. So you can ask somebody a question. When does the Ran say you count women for a minyan? For Mikra Megillah, for a tzibur. Is that wild? So tell that to your wife. Again, you can say, well, you don't need a minyan, but there's an inyan to have a minyan, and you count women to that minyan according to the Ran. And he doesn't say, oh, we don't pass like that. No, he seems like good with that. Yes, Rabbi Newman. You're opening up a can of worms here. women are allowed to lane all the time. The Gemara says they're not, that we don't do it because they come with a tzibur. Okay, that's something else. No, that's another problem. But yeah. Okay. Yes, women can lane for women. They can lane for women. Yeah. So number 10 was about Mashalach Manos, and number 11, number 12, 13, 14 are in the Rambam. We're not going to have time to do it. If you want to see what's really crazy, is number 15. It's just Kol Sefer Nevi'im, Kol Aksiv Masin Lebatel Moshe Mashiach. All the works of the prophets and the writings, not the 5 books, are going to be nullified. It's a crazy Rambam. Sane. A lot of people say he doesn't really mean it. Megillat Esther, with the exception of Megillat Esther, that will continue forever, like the Chumash, like the laws of the Torah Shabbat Peh. Even though all memory of the pain will be forgotten, that, my friends, is your homework to figure out what exactly that means. What?
That will continue.
Yes, Purim will continue. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah. Give me 1 second. Wait 1 second.